I'm Sally, a 50-year-old housewife. Both of my children are working adults. They've left home and are living on their own. Now that they're independent, I've started working from home in addition to my housewife duties. My husband has been very supportive of me working from home. At first, I was only able to make around $200 a month, but gradually my income increased to $600, then $800. I'm grateful to the clients who give me work. My sister-in-law's family also lives in the same neighborhood. She's my husband's twin sister, so she's the same age as him. My husband and I are the same age as well, so inevitably, I'm also the same age as my sister-in-law. We became somewhat close from the beginning, but I've always disliked my sister-in-law, and even talking to her was bothersome. My husband also consistently expressed his dislike for his sister. I suppose she's always been arrogant. She's very conceited, loves to look down on people, the type of woman who loves to show off, and it's quite annoying. At her place, she has a bedridden son. For me, he's my nephew. Tommy is 24. He has suffered from a serious illness since he was little, and he can hardly move his body. Therefore, he has always lived in bed. One day, my sister-in-law texted me. It was a snide and condescending text. I'm going to be in Hawaii starting today. I booked a luxury hotel and I'll be enjoying a whole week there. Well, I guess you can't go, right? Because my poor little brother doesn't make much money. Aren't you guys such a poor middle-aged couple? You're probably on the verge of divorce. Huh? I'm going to be in a swimsuit attracting everyone's attention on the beach. You, with your matronly figure, can't even wear a swimsuit, right? Your belly must be saggy after having 2 kids. But I only have Tommy, so I'm still slim and firm. Nobody would guess I'm 50. Not like you, a fat old woman. How rude could she be? It's true that I have 2 children. They were born close together, so my body didn't snap back right away. Even now, I can't say I have a toned, beautiful belly. I have a matronly figure, but so does my sister-in-law. My sister-in-law seems to have a lot of confidence in herself, but to me, she's the same level. If she was a very beautiful and well-shaped person, I might be able to tolerate her comments. But why do I have to hear this from my sister-in-law? Moreover, I wondered what she was going to do with Tommy. So what's going to happen with Tommy? Are you leaving him somewhere or having someone come in every day? Even staying overnight? Huh? There's no way I'm doing that. It's a hassle. He'll be fine just sleeping at home, won't he? Anyway, I left some drinks and things by his bed. That's horrible. How can you do such a thing? What? I don't need to be told by someone like you who hasn't had any hardship. My life is messed up because of him. I shouldn't have had a son like that. Well then, I'll take care of him. I'll go get Tommy now. Do whatever you want. I'll be happy if he's gone. Just wait. I'll be there shortly. And so I headed towards my sister-in-law's house. It's a mere 5-minute drive, so it's very close. Tommy is bedridden and uses a special wheelchair to get around. That's why I headed there in a station wagon, which can accommodate a wheelchair. You really came for this kind of guy? Yes, I did, because I feel sorry for Tommy. He's just a burden, just lazing around doing nothing at his age. Well, you're also a full-time housewife loafing around, so you're perfect for each other. I'm doing remote work, you know. I'm not a housewife loafing around, and not all housewives are loafers, right? Pff, remote work, huh? That's not a real job. Both my husband and I are full-time employees. You're basically just a housewife. It'd serve you right to spend the rest of your life taking care of Tommy. Oh, is that so? Let's go, Tommy. Okay. Tommy seemed to be rather downcast. It can't be helped, as he's being treated like this by his biological mother. I understand that taking care of a sick child is very difficult, but it's too cruel to say such things right in front of him. At the very least, if she has to vent, I wish she would do it somewhere out of the child's sight. It doesn't matter whether the child is an adult, because anyone in the same situation will definitely get hurt. After some time, I managed to bring Tommy to our house. Then my husband came home. Huh? Tommy? Why are you here? Uncle David, I'm sorry. The truth is, your sister was going to leave Tommy behind because she's going on vacation, so I said I'd bring him home. I'm sorry for doing this without consulting you first.
No, it's all right. My sister must have lost her mind. Leaving him behind is just the lowest. Tommy, feel free to stay here from now on. We'll take good care of you.
Uncle David, that's right. You don't have to worry about anything. I've loved you since you were a kid. Thank you, Aunt Sally. I absolutely detest my sister-in-law and her husband. They're terribly malicious and the worst kind of people. However, I've always liked Tommy. Despite suffering from his illness, he's overflowing with empathy for others, and above all, he's very smart. I don't think he's been able to attend special education school much, but he was naturally bright to begin with. I've always thought that he was the definition of a smart kid. I heard my sister-in-law and her husband left for Hawaii after that. I was shocked that they really intended to go to Hawaii, leaving behind their bedridden son. I wonder what they would do if something happened to him. They wouldn't be able to come back right away. My husband was equally astounded.
Seriously, my sister and her husband must be out of their minds. Going to Hawaii and leaving Tommy behind?
I agree. I might be out of place saying this since I've never taken care of him, but to leave him without making use of any care services or facilities?
If that message hadn't come, Tommy would have been left behind without us even noticing. Gives me the chills.
Yes, it's really horrible. Indeed, I've never cared for a child with a serious illness. My in-laws are still very much alive and well, and they've always said that if they ever become unable to move, they'll go to a senior home, so I've never been a caregiver either. That's why I didn't feel in a position to criticize my sister-in-law, but I still can't fathom how she could just leave her son with only a drink and abandon him. The child has a serious illness, so they can receive welfare support, and if they need to travel far, they can also use short-term care facilities. My sister-in-law and her family returned home. They came all the way to our home just to insult us. Here, this is a souvenir. It's perfect for you guys.
What's this?
They're seashells we picked up at the beach. We have plenty, so we're giving some to you. We don't want them. Oh, really? You're rejecting my kindness. Would you prefer this driftwood, then? We don't want any of them. By the way, is Tommy doing okay? Not that I care about such a useless child.
That's cruel. How could you say such a thing about your own son?
What? What do you know? It's just the worst, having given birth to him only to find out he has a severe illness. I want the money I spent on raising him back. You can only say that because you don't understand how I feel, having lived for such a useless son. Oh, really? So, about what you said before, about leaving him to us, you're fine with us adopting him then? Do whatever you want. Who in their right mind would adopt a child like that? Are you out of your mind?
It's not crazy. I'm serious.
With that, I closed the door. My sister-in-law and her husband left after that. My husband and I decided to adopt Tommy as our own. And so, Tommy became our child. He had been shocked by being abandoned by his biological parents, but gradually he began to smile in our home. He is bedridden, but he can use his hands, so he freely used tablets and smartphones while lying down. One day, Tommy seemed very happy.
Look, my work is going to be published in a literary magazine.
What? A literary magazine?
I've been writing novels as a hobby. Because I'm bedridden, it's the only thing I can do. It's a little embarrassing hobby, though.
There's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's a great hobby. Can I take a look?
Yeah, this is the first one I wrote.
I decided to read the short story that Tommy said he had written. It was very well done. It really hit home. This is amazing. I can't believe how good it is. I can't really describe my feelings in words.
I just tried writing it on my tablet and it was surprisingly well received. So then I wrote a medium-length story. And this one too. This one got published in the magazine.
I see. I had no idea you had such a talent. I showed it to my husband as well. He, being an avid reader, was utterly impressed.
This is amazing. It feels like pure literature.
Yeah, I admire Fitzgerald and Hemingway. I also like Dostoevsky and Hesse.
So that's why you wrapped it up like this. It gives off a somewhat melancholic feeling. The authors you mentioned, their works are indeed sorrowful or rather tragic.
Thanks. That's what I aim for. Thus, Tommy's novel was set to be published in hardcover. He chose to use a pseudonym as an author, Scott Wheel. He took Scott from F. Scott Fitzgerald and Wheel from Hermann Hesse's Beneath the Wheel. Soon, author Scott Wheel's book became a smash hit. It seemed to be selling out rapidly at bookstores. There was even a dedicated section for his books at the local bookstore, which made me happy. Then, Tommy won the Pulitzer Prize. We were all surprised. I won the Pulitzer Prize? That's amazing. You really did work hard for this.
Oh, Tommy's wonderful talent has been recognized by the world. There's nothing more joyful.
Yes, even someone bedridden like me can become a recognized writer. No one should ever give up on their dreams. I need to take a page out of your book. Then a press conference was arranged. Of course, without us. Tommy couldn't go on stage. He needed to be seated in a special wheelchair. His upper body needed to be secured. I wheeled him into the venue. Tommy seemed tense, his facial expression showing nervousness. Finally, the press conference began. Tommy was in front of many flashing cameras. The live television broadcast began as well.
I, Scott Will, am a bedridden author. Since childhood, I've suffered from a serious illness and spent most of my time in bed. However, reading books was my escape. So I decided that I too wanted to be an author and bring everyone some inspiration. I'm grateful to everyone who read my books and to my step-parents who adopted me. After Tommy's speech, the journalists started asking questions. Some were rather insensitive. They probed about why he was adopted. To this, Tommy responded,
My real mother was very troubled due to my illness. She probably grew to dislike me. I can't blame her for it. Then voices rose from everywhere. What a terrible parent.
That's really low.
However, Tommy did not seem to want any pity.
Everyone has their circumstances, so I'd ask you to not judge them here. Please, I beg you.
When everything ended, my husband and I helped Tommy get into the car. Our car was modified so that Tommy's wheelchair could easily get in. Upon returning home, my sister-in-law and her husband were waiting for us. Tommy, you won the Pulitzer Prize? I'm so happy. Come live with us again. My sister-in-law suddenly changed her attitude. She probably thought that Tommy was going to make a lot of money. No, I'll keep living here. I'm not going back to that house. But I'm your real mother.
My only parents are Sally and David.
Then give us the prize money.
No, this money's for my mom and dad, not you. It's for Sally.
What? I'm the one who raised you all these years. Give it to me.
No way.
Despite her not being short on money, my sister-in-law has a keen nose for it. She's the type to latch onto anything that could quickly turn into cash. That's why she insisted on having the $15,000 from the Pulitzer Prize. But Tommy wasn't giving up either.
I no longer think of you as parents. Even when I was young, you insulted me. I didn't speak ill of you at the press conference, but you often said things like you wished you hadn't given birth to me. You even said you wanted to abandon such a worthless son, didn't you? Do you have any idea how much that hurt?
I'm the one who's at a loss for having given birth to someone like you. You should be the one apologizing. I did nothing wrong. How dare you forget the favor of raising you? Her husband also kept demanding for the money. It made me wonder how greedy they could be. It's shameful. Really vulgar. They flated their status as full-time employees and how they weren't short on money, yet they seemed foolish. So I decided to counterattack. You love money so much you're selling all kinds of stuff on those online marketplaces, aren't you? You're that desperate to make a profit? What? Look, you're selling a bunch of seashells, right? And it seems like you're also selling coral. You think that's okay? Huh? Everyone buys seashells to decorate their homes. No, that's not okay. Maybe taking a few seashells as a souvenir from a beach in Hawaii is okay, but certainly not coral. Even if you say it's not okay, they're beautiful and they're not alive, so what's the problem? It's not about that. Both seashells and coral are important in forming the beach. Even if the coral is dead, it's not okay to take them home. It's even written on Hawaii's official website. Maybe check out the fishing regulations of Hawaii. It'll show you it's not okay. And seems you might even have to pay a fine if it's deemed malicious. What? No way, I absolutely refuse. Well, since you're selling them on the online marketplaces, it's definitely malicious. So I'm going to report you. We're going inside the house now. Bye. No, don't. I totally will. You'll definitely get caught. I can't wait. And with that, we swiftly went inside our house. Immediately after, we contacted the police. Anyone might pick up a few seashells, but I saw it on the online marketplace. My sister-in-law was selling a huge amount of seashells and coral, and it was a ridiculously large amount. I thought she was a poacher or something. She might have thought it was okay to take coral as long as it wasn't alive, but ignorance can be scary. Of course, I also reported her on the online marketplace. Well, I realized the situation just yesterday, so I think it served as a perfect payback. Ever since then, my sister-in-law got involved with the police and ended up paying fines. I hope she realizes the gravity of her actions. She has done something so serious that she should reflect on her actions. Since then, my sister-in-law has stopped coming to our house. I wonder if she's scared that I might do something again. As far as I'm concerned, I wouldn't do anything unpleasant to her unless she does something to me. But I don't want to deal with my sister-in-law, so I'm thankful she's keeping her distance. I wish she would keep it this way forever. I, on the other hand, am taking care of Tommy while working from home. I'm also getting help from a caregiver, so I don't have to do everything on my own. Indeed, it's tough to care for him as he's bedridden, but I'm happy just to be able to be with him. I want Tommy to keep writing novels worry-free from now on. I hope that his novels will become even more well-known all over the world. Our kids have also become huge fans of Tommy's novels. They'll be coming back home soon, and I hope we can all spend a good time together as a family. I'm Kayla, and I'll be turning 55 soon. I have a son named Nick, and I divorced my husband when Nick was in middle school. The reason was my husband's infidelity. Since then, it's just been Nick and I, but now he's married and I live with him and his wife. My daughter-in-law, Nora, is a very beautiful woman. Initially, I had a very good impression of her, but after living together, her true colors showed. She stays at home as a homemaker, but she doesn't do anything that resembles homemaking. She leaves everything to me, and if I ever ask for help, she turns vicious, which is hard to imagine, given her pretty face, and I've often been on the receiving end of her abuse. I wouldn't mind as much if I were just a homemaker, but since I work, there are days when I'm so tired that I wish for help. Nick has seen the way things are between his wife and I. He's asked her to help around the house, but after being verbally abused just like me, he gave up. Seeing all this, I resigned myself to endure without saying anything, but then one day, everything changed. Kayla. As the summer passed and the weather began to cool, I had a day off from work and was at home when I heard Nora's voice calling me. Usually it sounded sarcastic, but that day it seemed frail. Wondering what it was, I stopped my chores and peeked into the couple's bedroom. There I saw Nora, pale-faced and about to fall off the bed. What's wrong? I rushed to Nora, touching her hand to check on her. Her hand was chillingly cold, with a pulse that felt slightly fast. She didn't seem to be in a healthy state. Thinking it might be a cold, I touched her forehead, but it wasn't hot. Are you okay? What's wrong? I leaned over her listless body and asked. In a faint voice, she barely replied. My stomach hurts so bad, she said, rubbing her lower abdomen. I thought it might be severe menstrual pain, but when I asked if she had any other symptoms, she mentioned that she had been experiencing diarrhea for a few days, sometimes with blood. I wondered if it could be hemorrhoids, but it seemed unlikely that just hemorrhoids would cause such a severe condition. I decided to take her to urgent care despite the uncertainty. Urgent care seems excessive. Water will be fine. I told her that we needed to go to the urgent care immediately, and although she looked annoyed, her voice still sounded in pain. I was frustrated with her reluctance, but I forced her into the car and drove to urgent care. I informed Nick, telling him we were at the urgent care clinic, and he said he would come by after work, so we waited for him. The waiting room was full of people, and it looked like it would be a while before Nora's turn came. Nora chose an empty spot on the long bench and just lay down as if all strength had left her. She must be feeling pretty awful to find it hard to even stay awake. Worried, I kept an eye on Nora while waiting for our turn. How long had we been here? After about 2 or 3 hours, we were finally called into the examination room. It was a struggle, but I managed to help the barely rising Nora to enter with me. That's where the conversation and a series of tests began. We'd arrived at the clinic sometime after 2 p.m., but by the time all the tests were done, I think it was past 5 p.m. Not only was Nora worn out from being tossed around for tests, but I was also beat from just being there with her. It's exhausting, whether it's an urgent care clinic or not. I sat down next to the exhausted Nora and let out a heavy sigh. Then her name was called. I got Nora up again, and we entered the indicated examination room, locking eyes with the doctor inside. The doctor wore a grave look and said we needed more detailed tests, and then Nora had to be admitted immediately at the hospital. I knew this would happen. Afterwards, a nurse led us to the room Nora would be staying in and handed me a paper with a list of things she'd need. "Dr. Miller, I know you will understand, so I'll skip the explanation," the nurse said with a smile outside the room. I scratched my head and looked at the nurse. "I'm a family member of the patient, you know. How about giving me a little rundown?" I said with a forced smile. The nurse sighed heavily. "Dr. Miller, you know how busy we are, right? Please." With that, the nurse headed towards Nora. The reason the nurse spoke to me that way was because I'm an internist here. I've been around since my residency, almost 30 years now. Everyone, nurses and doctors alike, knows me here. But Nora doesn't know I'm a doctor. Nick thought it best to keep it under wraps. He said if people found out I was a doctor, they'd start hounding me for money. Nick, who's also a doctor, says we're not short on money, but he thinks I'm underestimating Nora. I didn't understand what he meant by that at the time, but looking at Nora now, it's clear. She does nothing, even though she's a homemaker and controls all the money Nick earns, doing as she pleases with it. When she's well, she goes shopping and comes back holding shopping bags from fancy brands, which is a bit off-putting to see. I've asked the hospital not to mention that I'm one of their doctors, so Nora won't find out. For now, I've left everything to the nurses and decided to go home to get Nora's things for the hospital stay. As I was grabbing items like clothes, a toothbrush, and a cup, Nick came back. Looking at the clock, it was already 7 p.m. "I'm home," he said. "Oh, didn't you stop by the hospital?" I asked, thinking he wouldn't be home this early if he had. Nick let out a heavy sigh and put his bag down onto the dining table. "I called as I was heading there, but she told me there's nothing I can do. Instead, she told me to go buy sweets, and while I'm at it, pick up her things from the house." He recounted with a wry smile. Nick was exhausted deep down, no doubt about it. "Well, I've just finished getting ready, so I'll bring it over," I said, mirroring Nick's wry smile. With that, we set off again for the hospital, where Nora was admitted. Upon reaching the hospital and entering Nora's room, the sight of her connected to an IV and fast asleep from exhaustion greeted us. She's truly lovely when she's peaceful, I thought, though I could never tell her that. Nick quietly arranged her things without waking Nora, then sat down on a chair. What could it be? He muttered under his breath. Watching him, I felt his concern. I tilted my head. From what I've heard, it's hard to say. Let's just wait for the results of tomorrow's colonoscopy and blood tests. Nick nodded in agreement, and we headed home. The next day, I had work, thinking I'd check on other patients while waiting for Nora's diagnosis. At work, another doctor stopped me to discuss Nora's condition. The diagnosis was Crohn's disease. It's an intractable disease with an unclear cause, yet it's also a condition that many people suffer from. It seemed that Nora's condition had worsened, putting her in a serious state. I was frustrated with myself as a doctor for not realizing it sooner. The presence of a tumor also raised the possibility of colon cancer, and we might need to plan surgery. For now, I had to leave it to the other doctor to explain the situation to Nora. After finishing my shift and changing, I couldn't shake my concern for Nora, so I headed to her room, out of my white coat. Inside, I found Nora's mother, Victoria, talking to her. "You'll be fine. This is a big hospital, and the doctor also said you'll be okay." She seemed to be encouraging Nora. I waited for a pause before entering the room. "Nora, how are you feeling?" Victoria noticed me enter and turned my way, her face swiftly turning into a scowl. I was taken aback and stopped in my tracks. "You, living under the same roof and not noticing my daughter's condition? Nick's a doctor, isn't he? You've both been so useless." She lashed out. Her words struck a nerve, but I found myself speechless. Her face turned beet red with her breaths heavy, seeming on the verge of jumping at me. "Seriously, the least you could do, since you hardly work, is quit your job and devote yourself to Nora." When Victoria noticed my silence, she raised her voice again. "Even if you don't know about my job, nobody has the right to say such things," I thought, feeling a bit offended. But I realized that arguing wouldn't solve anything, especially not in front of a sick person. I simply apologized to Victoria and turned my attention to Nora. Nora seemed to be in a better condition than yesterday. At least her complexion was not poor. However, she looked at me with displeasure. "You seem much better than yesterday," I said with a smile as I approached her, but Nora turned her face away.
"Ugh, seeing your face, Kayla, is making me feel sick."
"Yeah, nobody likes a meager older lady around. Let's send her home." It was clear they didn't care for me at all. Victoria, trying to soothe Nora, who looked ready to curse me out, made me stop approaching any further. "I'm sorry, then. I'll be leaving now." With those words, I left the room quickly and closed the door behind me. Feeling a bit upset myself, I headed home. Nick arrived soon after, having visited Nora, and it seemed he had learned of her Crohn's disease. He lamented not noticing earlier, sharing the same sentiments as me. "There's nothing we can do about it now. Let's focus on treatment and support her as much as we can," I said to Nick, trying to lift his spirits. He nodded quietly. "Yeah," though he seemed unconvinced. Nora began treatment that day, but for some reason, she didn't agree to surgery, opting for medication instead. The doctor mentioned the tumor was rather large and recommended immediate surgery, but she was adamant about not undergoing the procedure. So they turned to me for persuasion, but someone who seldom heeds my advice is unlikely to start now. Despite my hesitation, I've decided to visit Nora again after work. "Nora, may I come in?" I knocked on the hospital room door and called out to Nora, but there was no answer. After waiting a few seconds, I opened the door slowly and saw Nora watching TV. "How are you feeling?" I sat down in the chair next to her and asked. Nora didn't look at me or say a word, just kept watching the TV. Wondering what to do next, I continued the conversation. "I spoke with your doctor earlier. They say you're refusing surgery? They seem to think it's urgent. Is there a reason you don't want it?"
"It's none of your business."
I expected such a response. I could back down, but as a doctor, and as Nick's mother, I couldn't. "Don't say that. Let's just talk about it." Nora sighed heavily and turned off the TV. She didn't look at me, but stared outside instead.
"They said it would cost over $30,000, including the hospital stay. So I just thought it was impossible."
$30,000? I blurted out in surprise.
"It's a waste, right?"
She chuckled through her nose and pulled the blanket over her, but I wondered if she was regretting her words. She certainly seemed to need this. Pondering what to do, an idea struck me. "I'll pay for it. That would be all right, wouldn't it?" At that, her wide eyes opened even wider to look at me.
"You can afford that with your non-paying job?"
"It's fine. I have savings, enough to cover this."
"You're not going to ask for it back later?"
"I won't, so please go ahead with the surgery." I realized I must not have her trust, but this was no time to dwell on that. I just hoped she would accept the offer sincerely. After some thought, she gave a small nod. I smiled, left the hospital room, and informed the attending doctor. I also felt I should tell Nick, so when I got home I did, and his expression turned to one of mild distress. "I'm so sorry. I should be paying, but this really helps." "Do you not have savings?" Understanding he was still young, it was surprising that a doctor of a few years had no savings. When I pressed, his expression grew even more troubled. All the money went to Nora, even the savings. I really don't know what to do now. Watching him bury his head in his arms on the table, I felt sorry for him. You should take charge of the finances. I want to, but she gets angry when I suggest it. According to Nick, she was so modest while they were dating, never fixated on money. But after getting married, she became a different person, quick to anger, throwing fits over trivial matters, and not shying away from spending money. Nick regretted tying the knot, but seemed unable to make the leap to divorce. Maybe he's too kind, thinking that if he just endures, Nora wouldn't have to be unhappy. Then, with Nora's diagnosis of a serious illness, it only made it harder for Nick to consider leaving. Certainly, if he were to propose divorce to a seriously ill Nora now, he'd be met with cold stares. I just told Nick that for now, he should focus on helping Nora get a bit better, and we'd think about the rest later. A few days went by, and on a day when Nick and I both had off, we went to see Nora. Entering the hospital room, Victoria was there too. Hello. As I walked in with Nick, Victoria's glare hardened, but having grown somewhat immune to that look, I approached Nora without faltering. Nick, apparently not used to it, stopped in his tracks and didn't come closer. How are you feeling? I looked at Nora, whose complexion seemed a bit off, maybe not feeling well. I don't know. Her response to my words might be a small sign of progress. I smiled at Nora's words and pulled out a check from my bag. I had put it in an envelope. Here, this is what I promised you before. As I handed it to her, Nora's eyes lit up. She grabbed it and immediately checked inside. She looked pleased, as if she'd been waiting for it. From the outside, you'd think she loved money, which left me with a wry smile. What's this? Victoria, unaware of the money situation, widened her eyes at the check in Nora's hands, then shot a sharper-than-usual glare my way. What is this? This is for the treatment expenses. Nora was worried about the costs. I replied, wondering if I should have gotten Victoria's permission beforehand, to which she narrowed her eyes and scoffed. Playing the savior? Don't get ahead of yourself. With that, she snatched the check from Nora's hand and pushed it back at me. Nora whispered a small, "Ah," but quickly looked down when Victoria glared at her. I didn't mean it that way. I just heard that it would be better to have the surgery as soon as possible. There's no need. This child is strong and can make do with just medication. The doctor in charge didn't say that. I wonder why Victoria is so against surgery. It's as if she can't entertain the thought. I look over to Nick, keeping my distance, but he shrugs, seemingly clueless. Nora says she's fine with it. Turning away, Victoria speaks, and I shift my gaze to Nora. Then Nora looks away uncomfortably.
That's right. I don't need any surgery. Just leave me alone.
Despite her agreeing to the surgery earlier, I feel incredibly disappointed. But what if you have cancer? Can you just shut up? I don't want to hear an outsider's opinion. Nick tries to speak up to persuade her, but Victoria cuts him off. We don't plan to listen to you, so could you please go away?
Yeah, just go away.
As I run out of things to say, Victoria pulls my arm, urging me outside. Nora joins in with a laugh. Nick looks puzzled and troubled. Please, wait. Mom has gone through such lengths.
Quiet. I married a doctor and ended up with such a quack. You don't earn much, and you're totally useless.
At that, Nick's expression changes. Clearly, he's angry. It's bad when Nick, who rarely gets angry, is provoked. I grab Nick's shoulder and shake my head to calm him down. Nick looks at me, biting his lip, barely containing his anger. Nora, are you really okay with this? Deciding they won't listen to anything more, I turn to Nora one last time. Nora frowns, but then looks at me with a forced laugh.
I'm fine. Now please take that quack and leave.
At her signal, I take Nick's hand and leave the room. Opening the door, a nurse stands there, her face awkward. That's the situation, so please pass it on to the attending doctor. I don't care anymore. Let her do as she pleases. I tell the frozen nurse, who can only nod slightly. Then I urge Nick to go home, and after that, I head to the director's office to convey something before returning home. Back home, Nick sits at the dining table, not moving, his face full of frustration. Why not just divorce? There's no need to stay after being told off like that. Nora's words had struck a chord with me too. I'm a doctor, but before that, I'm Nick's mother. I can't stay silent after being disparaged by Nora and Victoria, but still. Yet he seems undecided, his hand on the table gripping tightly, trembling slightly. It's your decision, but I'm done living with that girl. You can have this house, I'll move out. Upon hearing this, Nick, who had been looking down, looks up in surprise. What are you talking about? This is your house. It's fine. I just resigned too. I'll find a calmer place to work. Indeed, the reason I went to the director's office earlier was to submit my resignation request. I had been waiting for the right moment to leave my current hospital for some time. Having worked there for many years in a general hospital setting, it had become too much for me to keep up. So I thought about continuing my practice in a more settled place, but the opportunity had been elusive, making this the perfect time. Wait a second, you can't just decide that so easily. It must have been sudden for Nick. I smiled at Nick, who looked anxious. It's something I've thought about for a long time. It's okay. It's the right moment. At that, Nick seemed to be at a loss for words, looking down again. Without saying anything more to Nick, I went into my room, checked online for a property in the area that I thought was good, and started preparing. Months later, as I told Nick, I moved away from the place I had lived before, relocating to a much more rural area. I managed to fit in with the community, and am working as a doctor in a small hospital. And now, Nick lives with me. He had divorced Nora, sold his house, and moved down here. From what I heard, Nick spent some time with Nora, trying to convince her to get treatment. But whether it was because of Victoria or not, she never had the surgery, and her condition just worsened. But she still had the energy to berate Nick, and seeing that she never changed, Nick grew tired of it, especially when Victoria started demanding alimony, blaming him for Nora's condition, calling him a quack. Those words led Nick to decide to leave Nora. He offered alimony in exchange for a divorce, and although Victoria was against it, Nora agreed, and they divorced rather swiftly. Later, Nick heard that Nora's condition was indeed a malignant tumor, progressing rapidly due to her youth, advancing to the terminal stage. Victoria begged the doctor to do something, but was told it was hopeless and that she won't live much longer, which she tearfully relayed to Nick over the phone. Nora also reached out to Nick for help, but since she had refused it when it mattered, he did not respond. It may seem heartless, but this was a consequence of their own making. Nick was down for a while, wondering if it was his fault, but as time passed, he found peace and is now working diligently at a new hospital. I sometimes think of Nora, but now there is nothing I can do. I just hope she can spend what time she has left in happiness.